She had quit coffee because she thought that the tension in her body was from a nervous system that was ramped up. She also didn't know that coffee could help with parasite reduction. She put it back into her diet, and we started to see rigidity in her body decrease. You know why?
Greetings, coffee lovers from around the world. You are now watching the Health First Coffee Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, along with my co-host, Ildi Revi, and I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Our guest today is an integrative health practitioner and functional airway specialist. He has a holistic health practice in California that uses body work and movement and so much more. We're very excited to speak to him today. He's also got a podcast called From Compromised to Alchemized. You can check that out on YouTube. Joining us now is Dr. Neel Bulchandani. What's up, Dr. Neel? How you doing?
Hey, Jordan, I am doing well, and I have been a fan. I was telling you how I was listening to the podcast today, yesterday, and years ago, before the break that you all had.
Thank you so much.
It's just a pleasure to get to hang out and privileged to be on.
That's so cool, Dr. Neel. I appreciate that. I truly do. I didn't know you were a fan of the coffee podcast. So really appreciate you coming on the show. For the listeners, how about a quick background on your work in health and wellness, and then what brought you to the intersection of wellness and coffee?
Yeah. So I call myself an interdisciplinary manual therapist because though I started as a chiropractor 18 years ago, I have now merged more of like the fields of osteopathy along with chiropractic and craniosacral fascial therapy, visceral work working with organs, intranasal, intraoral work. And when my daughter was born with a tongue tie 10 years ago, that threw me down the rabbit hole of evaluating the tongue and its role in our health, for her ability to feed, and all the other babies, kids, and adults that I saw on their ability to oxygenate and take in that air that we need so much. And then I started to venture into helping people with those kinds of procedures, preparing them before and after, and even those who have had jaw surgeries, but even the bigger category of sleep apnea. So helping people in terms of how can they have proper tongue function, but then how can the floor of mouth be supple enough? How can the jaw be free enough? How can the whole body be free enough? And how can we live a life so that we can be more connected with the ones we love, so that we can be more able to accomplish our purpose, so that we can help more people because people are precious, all of them.
Can we start there? One of the subjects we deal with on this show a lot is toxic load.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Environmental toxins, everything from heavy metals and pollutants, even things like pathogens, mold exposure, stuff like that. When it comes to toxic load in the human body and liver health, what do we know about coffee and how it helps these things? And what do you see in your practice as you treat people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the role of chlorogenic acid in how it can help with liver detoxification pathways. But then there's so much more to say about how when the liver is given the proper help that it can be given, whether somebody has a healthy liver or they have methylation issues, MTHFR genetic mutation or other kinds, or their livers aren't performing as optimally because of genetic predisposition, there's even evidence that shows that, well, one of the amazing things about coffee is that in some of those cases, it helps with those who have methylation issues. There's a range of reasons I think that is true. I go down a lot of rabbit holes on that with my patients. And then I would say in my practice, what I've seen is, kind of like, actually before we dive into the liver, why? Because so many people come in my practice and they're like, can you check my liver? Because I'm a visceral specialist, meaning I check all the organs, how they function, whether there's tension there and how to free it up to optimize nerve flow, blood flow to it, and then its communication to the rest of the body. The liver gets a lot of credit, but it also gets vilified a lot because so many people think that because the right side here has pain and somebody's told them that they've found that there's pain there, that must mean the liver has a problem. I'm like, half the time they're pointing at an area that's actually the kidney. That if you can optimize kidney mobility and kidney restriction and free that up, it can help the autonomic nervous system, that it often deals with some of their issues they're having with adrenal fatigue. And, that's another thing I'll just mention here is that if this region is being talked about in my clinical practice, and I have so many people like, check my liver. And I'm like, well, first of all, you're getting labs done. There's a lot you're getting done to check your liver. But if we check that area, another thing we can say is that if you're coming in with adrenal fatigue, well, in the West, we get all crazy at separating different systems, right? But in the East, we can look at the roots of adrenal and renal means kidney, adrenal means on top of kidney. So in Eastern medicine, like, in the Chinese and Indian systems, they don't view the kidney and adrenals as separate. They're one
Right.
unit, one system. And so I can't tell you the amount of people that have come in with adrenal fatigue and they're taking tons of supplements on many adaptogens or whatnot. And it's actually the kidney that needed to be released in order for the adrenal to work better. And that was the issue with the adrenal fatigue. And so the kidney for me has a lot of answers. But the other thing that I'll mention is that a lot of people have come in too, dispelling myths is kind of, I think what I'm doing here is a lot of people have come in and said, I can't drink coffee because of this reason or that reason. I've heard you guys wax this topic. And for me, I would say what shows up is, a healthy disclaimer for those of you out there who have had issues, that I'm not telling you, I'm preaching to the choir here. You've figured out how coffee fits into your life. But I've had people come in that are convinced that because of their gut issues, that they can't have coffee, and they were told they couldn't by really knowledgeable people, amazing people I respect in all kinds of fields. Well, I look and I'll say, was anybody addressed your small intestine or that large intestine or the other organs, the stomach, the diaphragm? No. Okay, so you have tension in those areas and you have misalignments in the body that relate to them. And so then I'll viscerally work on those areas. So I've seen people be able to way more tolerate and even have coffee after I work on their visceral system, because it was those issues that were the reason that their gut couldn't process and absorb it, and therefore it was starting to become an issue. Some people come in and yes, their small intestines have leaky gut, gap junctions are off, and I've journeyed with so many people through that. And sometimes it's because of the glyphosate and we can talk about the pesticides that have torn down and created these gap junctions, so their leaky gut is the issue. And then when they have, of course, coffee that isn't healthy because they're not drinking purity, or these companies, and they're maybe having very, very poor quality coffee, that's only going to exacerbate an already, ridden system. But often I'll put them on this product or that product, and then their small intestine can get into a place of on the pathway to healing, and then coffee is great for them. I've journeyed with so many people who think they can't have it, thought they couldn't have it. And in my nuanced, narrow view, sometimes it's because, the nervous system isn't functioning well, but it's sometimes because of their gut.
That was an amazing breakdown. And there's a couple of points that I want to drill down on. The first thing is the methylation aspect. I want to go all the way back to that.
Yeah.
Do you mind just doing a little piece on methylation? First of all, if somebody doesn't understand what methylation is and how it affects our health, and then how coffee affects methylation, because that's very interesting to me.
So I think the liver, when it can't metabolize well, because of its genetic predisposition with the MTHFR gene and other genes, it means that it can't break down heavy metals. It can't, but I would say we pan out, and it can't metabolize the stuff we put in, stuff we take in, the things that our body is supposed to be resilient to, as we are beings on this planet, that we are made amazingly. Therefore, we are designed in our bodies to handle all of these things. Our liver is the main detox organ, yet we have a lymph system that gets toxins out. It's that that compromise to that organ inhibits and decreases the ability to normally conjugate, put together, and then disseminate or dissolve or expunge the metal that's around us, that's in foods inevitably, that's in materials we touch. So this is why a lot of people have exhaustively looked at, well, how can we then live a lifestyle where we can help the liver when it's dealing with those issues? I would just say that there's a lot of, light that has been put on how, the biofilm that exists when there are fungal infections, when there are parasite infections, they'll often be connected to heavy metal toxicity. These are all just too much pathogenic and toxic load for the liver. Quite burdensome for a healthy liver, but it can handle that. But then even more when these methylation issues exist. But what I've found is that I love how there is evidence that coffee can help in these issues because of its role of helping the liver. Now, I think there's an article or two that says that there are some people that when the homocysteine levels do elevate in those that have very high homocysteine levels, there is a consideration that perhaps coffee consumption in those individuals with those methylation issues should be watched carefully. But I also think a lot of those studies are saying excessive coffee. So I think some of the studies that are being done on elevated homocysteine levels for those who have methylation issues, that I don't even think that that's necessarily relevant to a lot of us out there who are drinking 1-2 cups a day, maybe. But I do think that because in my practice, I have journeyed with so many people who have been compromised and they didn't know it when they came in because they thought they have a bicep that's so rigid, it's led to golfer's elbow, right? And then therefore they couldn't hold up their milk jug. So what they did is they got tons of body work. Then they have carpal tunnel surgeries, prolotherapy, PRP, stem cell therapy, and none of it worked. Well, one guy in particular, I'm just thinking of this guy back in like 2018, came into my office and he told me about all these things. Did one session, didn't work. It didn't relieve his bicep pain. The second time he came in, I said, I have ways of assessing. And I tested him and I thought, ooh, there's a fungal or a parasitic infection. I put him on a really quick course of treatment and in through the doors he walked next time, not having bicep pain for the first time in many, many years. And that was the pathway to his healing. There are other people who have come in similarly later when I became more enlightened about coffee, when I started drinking purity coffee after 2020. I had people come in, this woman from Romania, we had a Zoom, helped her heal. She moved to the city I was in, so I got to help her physically. She had quit coffee because she thought that the tension in her body was from a nervous system that was ramped up. She also didn't know that coffee could help with parasite reduction. I've seen clinically and anecdotally countless cases where I'm walking people through parasite elimination and detoxification. They have labs that show it. One of the best agents of care in their case was prescribing purity coffee. And when they did that adjunctively with just a couple of other parasite reduction supplements, they saw significant change. This person was stalling with her progress, and I said, so I'm wondering what we need to do here. And then I said, are you drinking coffee? And she said, no, proudly, right? She said proudly, no, I was told to not drink it, and I've taken it out of my diet, and I'm like, you have? Okay, interesting. Let me just ask you some questions here. I'm like, how did you feel when you were on it? And she's like, well, I felt alive, clarity, cognizant. And I said, okay, and then tell me about your symptoms of this issue. And she walked me through it quickly. Once I educated her on some of this, she put it back into her diet or her daily intake, her ritual, and we started to see rigidity in her body decrease. You know why? Because a parasite will hijack liver function, therefore it will inhibit liver detoxification. If the liver can't detoxify, the lymph can't clear, that means sluggish lymph will constrict fascia, and it will not allow the fascial system to communicate and let go. Then it'll hinder the brain and it'll put the body in fight, flight, sympathetic overdrive. Not coffee doing all this stuff, right? So she started administering that along with it and melted her fascia. Her toxic load decreased. And for the first time, her body would stay aligned and her horrible, debilitating back pain would decrease. And she started to feel like, well, I can have the clarity that I wanted, not only because of drinking coffee again, but because the toxic load was decreasing.
Where do people pick up these parasites? I've heard like eating sushi and raw fish. Where do we pick up these parasites, and why is it so important to understand? Because it can have real consequences.
Yeah. This is going to be like a cult classic, Santiago from Old Man and the Sea. Do you remember that book? Do you ever read that? You know
Give me
where
that one, yeah.
that scene in the book, scene in the movie, scene in the book, where he grabs the fish and he bites it, right? He
Mhm.
eats a live fish. Clearly, anybody who's doing that, I've done that before. You're going to get parasites from that in particular. There's cases like that. There's definitely cases of sushi consumption. There's a lot of instances, but I think what is good to recognize, or at least what I've seen clinically in my patients, is that they don't need to be eating a lot of sushi. They don't need to be eating a lot of raw food. It's just simply it's evident in the world. It's in water systems. They might, I was running. I used to run ultra marathons, and I was running one day, and I didn't bring any water with me, and it was a 25-mile run. So 25-mile run. I was found a place that there was water flowing. Foolishly, I drank that water. Well, you're likely going to get contaminants and parasites potentially from
Mm.
that. I think, like most things, the candida has been a scourge. Mold has been a scourge. There's a lot of
Mm.
scourges, right? And I'm going to be a little tongue in cheek here. However, when a body is resilient and has the capacity to do that, we are meant to be edified, fortified, and strong to stave off many conditions and predicaments. So I think that's to say that there is a ubiquitous stream of pathogens swirling around us in our air and water. And I think my goal has been, as a practitioner and as an advocate, to help people create resilience within their bodies through some really core basic practices so that they can be more impervious to these issues when they do come at us, because they're everywhere. I want to make sure that people know that parasite infection could be playing a pivotal role in the reason their fascia won't let go, the reason they've been to other people, including myself, and it's not letting go. They're not finding their TMJ released. They're not finding the jaw pain. They're not finding the headaches leave. They're not finding their body go into a state of rest. And it could be, amongst other things, a parasite load. So then I say, if it is that, and if we're confirming that, here's some simple ways. Let's just try a couple things, because if you can try a few things and we see effect, that could be how easy it is. And how can we give you an understanding of what's going on in your body, keeping in mind that the body's designed to heal itself, has this inborn ability, but we need help. It's definitely a paradox. So if I can focus on a few things that are holding us back and we can really go at that, we can probably find that we're going to feel better and we're going to have more ability to handle those other things that come our way that maybe we don't have answers for yet.
Mhm.
But I think there's the role of the liver in systemic reduction in toxin load is there. And I think that's the clearest. And I also think when we have these elements of the agents within coffee that can help with mitochondria, that is powerhouse of the cell and oxygenation. We're talking how much of the liver delegates that. I think also it's saying that when these areas in the body, from down to the organelle of the mitochondria to the organ of the liver, is that when we are optimizing function in increasing antioxidant levels, therefore reducing this rusting of the body that's happening through oxidation and oxidative stress, we are improving the regenerative capacity of the body, and we are
Mm.
keeping up oxygenation normally transported through the blood, but we are improving the conductivity of that in the body. So very anecdotally, I'll say this last part is that one of the great parts of my work, or the core parts of my work, is to find out how 4 main areas in the body can free up 70 areas. How 4 main areas in the body can free up the floor of the mouth, can unlock the tongue tension, can create changes in the lips, the cheeks, and the palate that can shift cranial bones. But one of the reasons that's important is because it increases the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. That is blood flow from the brain down through the whole body. And that is there embryologically. We have a lot of the same fluid from in utero that courses through our cerebrospinal fluid now. And without that flow, we don't have oxygen delivered, thereby promoting proper mitochondrial function. So I see in some cases when there is a parasite or other toxins or pathogens
Mm.
involved, things like coffee that improve the function of the liver can set up a sequence of events to where our tongue can move more properly and our palate can clear and our CSF flow can increase. Systemically, then we're going to oxygenate much more properly. And that's going to be a big key for health.
Oh, I got to talk about both of those subjects. First, mitochondrial production and efficiency. What do we know about the complex link between coffee and energy production and coffee and mitochondria?
For me, one of the biggest moments that I knew coffee was so important for me is when I was in New Zealand on this trip. I was teaching intuitive movement around the world, the practice that I developed and taught based on neuroscience and somatics. And we were my wife and we had one kid at the time, and we were there in New Zealand, and that's where The Hobbit was filmed, right? It's like
Mhm.
so we were about to go there to Hobbit Land or whatever where it was all filmed. We were staying at this farmhouse that was like a 45-minute drive away, and my daughter was still really young, like a year old, so I had to find like blankets and towels so I could cover the bright light that was coming through the curtain so that I could get her to sleep and she would stay asleep in her pack and play. Well, as soon as I took off those blankets and towels from that upper shelf in the closet that probably had never been opened in decades, a sea of dust went in the air, and all of a sudden I started getting really constricted in my chest. Later, I started to have a severe asthma attack. First one I had had in many years. Used to suffer from asthma when I was a little kid, since 4 years old. And I was struggling to breathe. I had to present at a gathering the next day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, one of the reasons I'm here, because we went to Singapore right after that where I was going to present, is for me to teach this work. So I'm sitting at the table thinking like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I remember, because I don't have an inhaler, I can't get an inhaler. It's been 4 years since I've used an inhaler. I remember how much coffee has helped me in other times in the past. So I was able to drink some good quality coffee, and all of a sudden my bronchioles dilated. And then, of course, it's really well known that caffeine, especially when it comes from coffee, is helpful for breathing. But I kind of want to shift to saying, because this is so important with energy,
Mhm.
is that caffeine can help, yes, and there's studies that show that. But in my perspective, when mold is present, or when we just stick to the topic of pathogens and toxicities are present, I believe that we have the chlorogenic acid and the other elements in coffee that are really helping with mitochondrial production. That's addressing the pathogenic toxic load that is constricting the bronchioles from that perspective. But then you have the mechanical dilating of the bronchioles that caffeine does. And so the synergistic effect of the caffeine in the coffee, plus the antioxidants and other elements of coffee that are helpful, those synergistically work to create an environment for better bronchodilation, for better oxygen transport, for better airflow, not only for the purpose of oxygenating our tissues, but so that we can have that healthy oxygenation facilitate healthy neuronal activity, cognition, and clarity. Coffee is listed as a weak bronchodilator. There's a
Hmm.
consensus in the studies that it's only weak. The reason I think that's relevant is because they're saying caffeine is a weak bronchodilator, is because they're looking at one aspect of mechanical bronchodilation as opposed to systemic vasculature, systemic function of the cardiorespiratory system. And because the lungs and the heart are inextricable, and therefore vascularity in the whole body is so relevant to oxygen flow, I have some ideas as I'm doing research about other metrics that I think are going to put forth. There's far more going on with bronchodilation and how much it helps people with airway issues than just mechanically increasing those bronchioles.
That's wild. Why does caffeine help us breathe? And coffee specifically. Why does this cocktail of compounds help us breathe better? I'd love to know more about that. Anything you can share on that?
Yeah, I mean, we I think you all know, or you've had many people say that while there is a mild transient effect in the nervous system in the body to where caffeine is a vasoconstrictor, it is reportedly been shown and documented for a long time to be a bronchodilator. So that's like been around. It's pretty wild how that's been around, right?
Hmm.
There's you can expand on either one. So I think right there is the mechanical evidence that that is what happens when we look at the systemic function of what agents do to the body. Beyond that, I have some theories on why is that though? Why is that happening? I mean, I think the vasoconstriction is pretty clear, because when you increase sympathetic tone, well, yeah, actually, that is the reason. It's when you increase the sympathetic nervous system function, you increase those systems that are required to keep us vigilant and alert and keep us moving better. So muscles, you want to, in one sense, you want to take blood flow away peripherally from organs to give them to muscles because you want muscles to be able to move and work better. So
Perform.
that's performance, right? So now for bronchodilation, same thing. If you have to get away from a tiger or you have to, catch a heavy object, lift a heavy object in an instant, you have to corral those forces as we are programmed to do that evolutionarily. We need oxygen flow in order to do that. So that transient, immediate imprint. So I just think it goes back to if we look at ourselves as biological beings that have adaptations and evolution, I think we were designed to have that happen. And I think interestingly, like we can go back to the indigenous tribes that would just chew the coffee leaf, chew the coffee fruit, even getting some of those benefits. It's a plant in life that I think was there to provide us some of the resources we need in emergencies. But I think we can find ways as we have to find that's medicinal. And so for me, if I'm on a trip and I'm ever struggling with breathing, that's why I always travel with Purity. It's always, I'm going to carry my Purity coffee with me everywhere. Even if I know they have all kinds of other coffees, I'm going to bring my AeroPress. I'm going to grind some coffee up as much as I can before the trip and bring it with me because I'm going to brew it wherever I need it, whenever I need it.
Yeah. And so what does the future hold, Dr. Neel? What are you currently immersed in? Where do you think all of this research is going here before we wrap it up?
Yeah. What I'm doing right now is I'm presenting at symposia and summits like in the Naboso Breath Fascia Movement Summit next month in Phoenix. Then I'm also the next month I'm leading a session at the Health Span Longevity Summit in LA. And so longevity. And I think there's such a key here where if we can have better quality of life, we can maybe have better quantity of life too. And so leading people on the floor for colloquially, I call it a phase shift when a body goes into such suppleness and expansiveness and freedom of movement and ease of clarity through the floor four, then you can have that. And I'm leading people in sessions on that. And then my next training in Santa Barbara, where I live right here, I'm training more practitioners. It's a 4-day training in my method. And I'm training up teachers and I've trained them up so they can become teachers of the method that I've put out there. And then they can become experts in their cities. And then next year, after I'm presenting at a symposium in Switzerland, and I'll be putting my program into clinics and organizations internationally. And I'm excited about that just because I want this to get into more hands. And what I was telling y'all about the mouth and how it leads to this, when the mouth forms, it affects the whole body. I've created a map of 70 areas, muscles, bones, fascia, where that it affects and organs. And when you look at that map, we realize, why is this relevant? Because we're finding more than 60% of people have these issues. So I am really on a mission to get this into textbooks, which is coming, and into more institutions so that fast forward a few years, there won't be the floor four or whatever, there'll be the body and the way to understand it. I think that's kind of the way we're going is like, this shouldn't be exclusive knowledge somebody has to find this person over in Santa Barbara for. This should just be out there. And so in this process, I'm finding a way to simplify, codify, and provide the backing for it with research. And a lot of people reach out and they say, how can I help you with this? And I'm like, join up and let's do it. And let's get this out there so more people can find this help.
Thank you, Dr. Neel, for taking the time today. This was an awesome episode. The podcast is Compromised to Alchemized. Go check that out.
Yeah.
And again, thank you, Dr. Neel.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. The privilege is mine. pinching myself all over. I'm so happy. This felt just right, though, right? It felt like just right to have this conversation with both of you.
Oh, we'll have you back on as soon as possible.
Okay.
The listeners appreciate it. I appreciate it. Ildi appreciates it. And most importantly, everybody, share this episode. If you like this episode, if you learned something, shoot it to a coffee lover. We love when you share the Health First Coffee podcast. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time, but that's all for today. This is Dr. Neel Bulchandani, Ildi Revy, and Jordan River all signing off, saying have an extraordinary rest of your day, and we'll see you next time on the Health First Coffee podcast.